Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about some upcoming anticipated releases for quarter two of the year, so that's going to be April to June. And I wanted to get this up a little bit earlier than I usually do because I think I usually end up posting my anticipated releases kind of at the start of the quarter that I'm talking about. And I wanted to get this up a little bit earlier so if there's something on this list that you're interested in and you have time to actually pre-order it or at least go check it out on release day whenever it does come out. So that's the reason I'm moving this a little bit earlier. And I'm also trying out a new format. I'm going to be doing a PowerPoint presentation instead of putting the images on the screen and like in the editing process. So I would love to know down in the comments below how you feel about that, if you like this format or not. And we're just going to go ahead and dive into it because we have quite a few books to talk about today. I'm going to try and go through them quickly, but I am very excited about quite a few of these. So, talking about our anticipated releases starting with April 1st, literally the first day of the new quarter, we're getting some new books. First of which is A Drop of Corruption by Robert Jackson Bennett. I absolutely love this one. I got an arc of it, and I'm excited for this one to come out for more people to read it. This is the second book in a sort of fantasy murder mystery series set in a really unique world where there is an empire that's made up of these like rings of walls that are protecting the people of the empire from leviathans that come out of the ocean and like trample all over everything every wet season. Within that empire, we're following Anna and Din, who are a kind of Holmes and Watson-esque mystery solving duo, and in each book they travel to a different part of the empire to solve particularly interesting or delicate cases. In this one, they get sent to a place that is technically not a part of the Empire, but it does have an agreement with the Empire that is about to reach this point where it's going that like area is going to be incorporated into the Empire as an official imperial canton. How many times can I say Empire and Imperial in a single sentence? Apparently, it's a lot. But the area called Yarrow is about to be incorporated into the Empire, so there's this like really tense political situation. And in the midst of all that, a treasury official goes missing. So Anna and Din are brought in to figure out what's happened. It leads to a much bigger conspiracy they have to unravel, and it's like, running against the clock. People are going to die if we don't solve this kind of tension. So I really, really enjoyed this one. I think it's a great follow up to book one, and I just love the series in general. I also think that this one has much stronger characterization than book one did. I know there were some reviews for book one that mentioned that people felt like the characters were a little bit cardboardy and bland. I didn't think so, but I could see why people felt that way, and I think that this book does a lot more heavy lifting in terms of the characterization. Then we're getting The Last Session by Julia Bartz. This is about a social worker named Thea who meets a patient who seems to be connected to her own dark past, but then that patient disappears. So Thea follows her into the desert to a creepy wellness retreat, and it sounds like it's going to be a little bit culty and definitely very weird. So I'm really looking forward to this one because I really liked the writing retreat from the same author, and I'm hoping it'll be similarly like weird, but in a way that the author like really commits to. Finally, we're getting Holy Terrors by Margaret Owen. This one is the third book in the Little Thieves series, following a con woman named Banja who gets into various kinds of mischief in each book. In this particular book, it sounds like she is being framed for a series of murders that turn political when a major figure is killed, and she has to get involved in court intrigue to figure out like what's going on and try to clear her own name. I think this series sounds super fun, and I remember reading a few pages of book one and thinking that the writing was like very tongue in cheek and funny. So if that's something that appeals to you, if you like a funny fantasy book, maybe this is for you. On April 8th, we're getting Fair Play by Louise Hegarty, which is a what sounds like a play on a golden age murder mystery following a young woman who organizes a birthday party for her brother. She invites a group of friends to an Airbnb at this like fancy manor house. They have a big party, they have a good time. The next morning her brother is dead. And suddenly the house has like a butler and a maid and a cook and a gardener, and a detective shows up to try and solve the case. I don't really know what to expect from this. I haven't heard any early reviews of it, but it just sounds super fun to me. Like it sounds like it's going to be a play on like an Agatha Christie style isolated closed circle murder mystery, and I love those, so I'm really excited to give this one a try. Then we're also getting Cold Eternity by S.A. Barnes, which is their next sci-fi horror. This one following a woman who is on the run from a political scandal and ends up on a station where they've like cryogenically frozen the bodies of a bunch of really wealthy people, and the station is mostly abandoned, except that she starts to suspect that there's something on the station with her. The description also briefly mentions AI, so I'm wondering if it's going to be a monster or if it's going to be like a creepy AI kind of a thing. But either way, it sounds kind of interesting, and I know people have typically had a kind of mixed response to S.A. Barnes, but I think this premise sounds particularly promising. On April 15th, we're getting Another Fine Mess by Lindy Ryan, which is the follow-up to Bless Your Heart. This is, as far as I can tell, following the Evans family, multi-generational family of women, as they are dealing with yet another supernatural problem. This family runs a funeral home, and they're also monster hunters on the side. The illustration on the cover makes me think maybe it's werewolves, but I actually don't know, and I haven't been able to find like a in-depth description of this book, so I'm just curious to find out more about it. I haven't read Bless Your Heart yet, but I have heard some good reviews, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I also just think that like the premise of these books are just really fun. Then we have Friends of the Museum by Heather McGowan, and this is kind of outside of my usual comfort zone in terms of things that I pick up for my own reading, but I really wanted to try and expand my reading horizons a little bit in 2025. So this one's a literary story following a group of coworkers in a New York City museum over 24 hours. Something crazy must happen because it's happening on the day of their annual like gala that they have at this museum, and it kicks off with the director getting a phone call from a lawyer. So that's all I really know about this, and it sounds like it's probably going to be a lot about like interpersonal drama and relationships, and it seems like it's going to be fun in a like reality TV kind of way, possibly. So I really don't know what to expect. Again, it's kind of outside of my comfort zone, but I thought it sounded intriguing. Then on April 22nd, we're getting When the Wolf Comes Home by Nat Cassidy. This one, like Another Fine Mess, is suggesting to me that it might be werewolves because wolf on cover. But this one is following a young woman who goes on the run with a random 5-year-old boy who shows up on her doorstep terrified, and the woman has a kind of violent altercation with the boy's father. The two of them end up on the run with the father in pursuit, and it seems like they're leaving a trail of bodies behind them. Don't know anything else beyond that, but it sounded like a really fun premise, and I've heard good things about this author, particularly for the book Mary, I believe is the title. It's the one with the woman with the bathtub on the cover. But I'm curious to give this author a try just because I haven't at this point. I've heard so many good things about those first two books, but this is the premise of theirs that I think most intrigues me. And then we're also getting Eat the Ones You Love by Sarah Maria Griffin, which I think I would sum up as two women in a florist shop, and also there's a plant that wants to eat one of them. And that's everything I know about this book. It sounds like it's going to be super weird and interesting, and I'm curious to give it a try just because it has, like, piqued my interest. Then on April 29th, we're getting The Staircase in the Woods by Chuck Wendig, which I believe is going to be like a supernatural horror. It's following a group of friends who made an oath to protect each other always when they were kids, and then one time they're on a camping trip and they find this weird staircase in the woods. One of the kids goes up and never comes back down, and the staircase disappears. But many years later, the friends come back together, find the staircase again, and they go up to try and figure out what happened to the friend that went missing. Very vague synopsis. I really don't know what to anticipate here, but I've heard good things about Chuck Wendig as well. I think that he's a fairly well-regarded horror author, and I think I have got pre-approved for an arc of this, so I might give it a try just because I already have access to it. But I wanted to put this one out here because I know a lot of people do like his writing. Moving into May, we get Modern Divination by Isabel Agajanian on May 6th. We also have a couple other books coming out that day, and I feel like this is one of the ones where I least understand what the premise of the book is, because this one is like about a witch who is losing her magic, but she has some sort of rivalry with a stronger witch, and then there's like a family of witches that she gets involved with. I'm really unclear on what the like central conflict of the story is, but I'm curious to find out. It just sounds like a fun witchy time, and I want to give it a try even though I have no idea what's going on. Then we're also getting The Devils by Joe Abercrombie, which is, I think, the first book of his that isn't set in the First Law world. I read the first book of the First Law and absolutely loved it, so I really wanted to give this one a try as well. And I've been hearing some really good early reviews for The Devils, but this one is following Brother Diaz, who is like a part of this religious order in whatever world this is. He gets called to the sacred city for a new assignment, which turns out to be like going on some sort of horrible journey, and he's given this group of like congregants to take with him. That's all I really know. Again, this is another one that I don't have a sense of like the central plot or the central kind of driving conflict of the story, but I'm much more willing to dive into that with Joe Abercrombie because you kind of have the same thing in the First Law. That very first book, The Blade itself, there's like no plot. It's all characters, but it's really like diving into like this tangled web of relationships, and clearly there's like somebody behind everything. Probably not like singular somebody, but like there's some sort of like power struggle happening, and you're not really aware of what that bigger thing is, but you're kind of in the weeds with the characters. And I really enjoyed that in that book. So I'm kind of okay going into this one not really understanding the plot or the premise. It's just we're going to follow Brother Diaz, and we're probably going to have a good time because Joe Abercrombie can write a sentence. The dude can write, hands down. But the other thing that I really liked about the description of this, even though it doesn't tell me anything about the actual like plot of the book, is that there's a line that says something along the lines of, with a hellish journey ahead of him, Brother Diaz sure is lucky to have the devils on his side. And I just think that's a great line, and I'm just excited to read this. I'm excited to read it because of the author. I'm excited to read it because it sounds like it's going to be a fun grimdark fantasy. Then we're also getting Overgrowth by Mira Grant, which is another one of the books that I'm particularly excited for. This is the same author as Into the Drowning Deep, which is one of my all-time favorite horror books and is also one of my favorite like sci-fi horror. I think that Mira Grant does a really good job balancing characters and science in sci-fi horror, which I think is probably pretty hard to do. I haven't read a lot of sci-fi horror that I particularly love. I like it in movies, but I haven't read a lot of it that I really enjoyed. So I want to give this one a shot because I have previously enjoyed Mira Grant's work. But this one is following a little girl who, from the time that she's 3, is telling people like, hey, I'm an alien, my alien family is going to come get me. And nobody believes her until the aliens actually show up. And this was another one with a really great line in it, and I did actually pull this one up because I wanted to share it, because it says, what happens when you know what's coming and just refuse to listen? That line suggests to me that this is probably going to get just like a little bit too real for me, but at the same time, I'm really intrigued and I really want to pick this one up just because I haven't read like a sci-fi horror that I've really enjoyed in a while. Then on May 13th, we're getting Immaculate Conception by Ling Ling Huang. And I have not read Natural Beauty, but I've heard a lot of great things, so that's why this one ended up on my list. I believe this one's following these 2 women who end up in a like obsessive friendship after they meet in art school, and one of the women marries a billionaire or millionaire or something who's working for a tech company developing a technology that will allow someone to like enter the mind of another person and experience their trauma, and it's supposed to like build empathy, but it in this instance is like fueling their obsessive friendship and they're getting like too close. So I'm not sure what to expect here because that sounds like it's going to go very weird and I don't have a sense of like what directions that could go, but it sounds really intriguing. And again, I've heard good things about Natural Beauty, so I wanted to pick this one up because I think I'm a little more interested in this premise than I was in the premise of Natural Beauty. Though if I like this one, I will also pick up that one. Then on May 20th, we're getting Strange New World by Vivian Shaw, which is the conclusion to the Dr. Greta Helsing series. I'm kind of sad the series is coming to an end because I really love the first 2 books, but at the same time, I'm so excited to just have more Greta Helsing. I still need to read book 3, but then I will be prepared for this one. I think this one is following Greta as she is on like a cross-country road trip with an angel and a demon, as there is like some sort of accord being written between heaven and hell. So I'm curious about that. I love Greta. She's such a good character, so I'm really looking forward to this one. Then we're getting Starving Saints by Caitlin Starling, which sounds like it's a really weird medieval horror about a castle under siege, and then the Constant Lady and her starving saints, or something like that. Something along those lines. Some entity appears in the castle, even though it's under siege and has been like in lockdown for all of this time. And things start to get weird in the castle. And we're following 3 women who are dealing with the situation, who seem to be the only 3 who remember the reality of what's going on outside of the castle. And I'm really intrigued by that premise. I have wanted to read something from Caitlin Starling for a while now. I have several of her books on my shelf, and I just need to like dive in and give her work a try. But honestly, I'm kind of intimidated because I think all of her work, from what I've heard, tends to be kind of like mind-bending and weird. So I'm not sure how I'm going to get on with that, but this one just sounded really like an interesting premise. Then we're getting The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig, which is a romantasy following a woman who is sort of a prophet. She's been working as I think it's a diviner is the name of the group that she's in, and she has visions, except that all of her fellow diviners start to go missing, and she ends up having to team up with a knight that she really doesn't like, who's like a heretic, to go on a journey to try and figure out what's happened to them. Sounds like it could be fun. I'm hesitant with romantasy, but I've heard so many good things about this author's previous series, which is the one that starts with One Dark Window, that I really wanted to give this one a try because I kind of liked the premise of it. I'm interested in this like journey aspect. I'm interested in the fact that it's like the religious aspect of like a character who is very much ingrained in this religious system and then somebody who doesn't believe in it, and I'm curious to see how that's going to play out. Then on May 27th, we're getting The Midnight Pack by Jasmine Kulyasha. I forgot to animate this. It's fine, don't worry about it. There is no cover at the moment. This one is following a private detective who's a like specialist in debunking cryptid sightings basically, and she gets sent off to investigate some sort of like creature in the woods and instead discovers a family of handsome scientists and gets involved with them, and like it sounds like it's going to be a little bit romancy. It's going to be like fun, silly urban fantasy. It just sounds like it's going to be a good time, and I'm really excited to give it a try because I'm looking for more kind of contemporary and urban fantasy series to pick up, partially because the Greta Helsing series is ending. So I need something that's going to fill that void, you know? Finally, moving into June, on June 3rd, we're getting The God and the Gwyson by Sophie Kim. This is another contemporary fantasy series that I'm enjoying, and it's also a kind of fantasy romance series. But this one is following on from the end of book one. We're following Sotga, who in book one is a fallen trickster god. I can't tell you much about him in this one because it would spoil it for you, but we're following Sotga again, and he is trying to find his way to his fated person, his soulmate, and finds someone he doesn't expect at the other end of that thread and ends up having to team up with her to try and solve his brother's murder. Sounds super fun. The first book in this series is extremely dramatic and angsty, and it really goes for it with the emotional impact. I believe the series is largely inspired by like K-dramas, which I'm not familiar with as a genre, but it just is so much fun. I just had a lot of fun reading the first book. It's so silly. It was like full of plot holes, but I just had so much fun that I just didn't care. And I'm really interested to be back in this world and to see where Sokka is now, because this book is taking place much later. I think it's like several decades later after book one, and he's like in therapy according to the description, which is an interesting place for Sokka to be if you read the first book. So I'm really curious to see how he's getting along at this point in time and to see how things go with like the thread, the fated thread and everything. So yeah, I just really had a good time with book one, and I'm excited to be getting book two in the series. Then we're also getting The Ghostwriter by Julie Clark, which I thought sounded like a really fun thriller. This one's following a woman who is the daughter of a famous horror novelist who is most well known for supposedly killing his wife and son. And now she's gonna ghostwrite her father's book because he says that he's finally ready to tell his side of the story. Sounds like it's going to be lots of family drama, very twisty, and I'm intrigued to see where this goes because I don't know if it's more interesting to me or not, if he did do it or didn't do it. But I'm curious to find out, and I'm curious to see like the journey to get us to that point. I forgot to animate a book apparently, so on June 10th, we're getting With a Vengeance by Riley Sager. This being his newest release is about a woman who was trying to get vengeance on people in like a train in the 60s, I believe. There's these people who like ruined her life at some point. She's trying to get vengeance on them, except people start dying on the train, and now she's got to figure out what the hell's going on because she wasn't going to murder anyone. She was gonna just like get them to confess to their sins and then hand them over to the police. But now people are dying and it's a problem. So I'm really curious about this. I always have a good time with Riley Sager books. I think frequently they're not very good, but they're usually fun. So now to the properly animated books. We're also getting Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. This is another one with a really vague premise. It's just like three women across time buried under the same tree. Something, something, roots have teeth. I don't understand. But I do remember seeing a clip of her speaking and talking about it being a book about hunger. I'm interested to see what that means. Then we're also getting King of Ashes by S.A. Cosby, which I'm very excited for. I really enjoyed All the Sinners Bleed, but this one's following Roman, who is like a financial whiz, and he works presumably as like an accountant or in finance in some way. But his father dies in a car accident, and he goes home to support his family, which consists of his sister, who is running the family business, which is a crematorium, and his younger brother, who's gotten embroiled in some things that he can't quite escape. So he ends up trying to help out his brother and getting involved with some organized crime people, and it's sounds like it's gonna be like really intense, really gritty, and I'm really excited for it because I loved All the Sinners Bleed. I felt like the characters were just so interesting, and the like family aspect of All the Sinners Bleed was really interesting. So I'm curious to read this one since it seems like it's even more focused on that kind of family aspect. And I just really enjoy the way that S.A. Cosby writes. His like writing is great, his characters are great, and I'm excited to see where it's going to go because it sounds like it's going to be like very intense. And then finally, we're getting Kakegori Summer by Emily Itami. This one is another one that's kind of outside of my usual comfort zone. This is a fiction story about three sisters coming together over the summer. They live like very different lives in very different places, but they end up on the coast for the summer together after one of them has experienced some sort of scandal. The one that experiences a scandal is like a Japanese music idol, and then the other two, one of them works in finance, and I can't remember what the third sister does exactly. But they come together in the wake of the scandal to try and support the youngest sister, and then they're also reckoning with something that happened with their mother like some number of years ago. And it seems like it's just going to be very much about like their family and their relationships. And I don't know what to expect because this one is so far outside of my comfort zone. But I thought it sounded like an interesting family story, which might be something you're noticing a little bit in some of the things that I picked, as I mentioned, like family relationships and kind of interpersonal drama and difficulties, I think are just really interesting. Excited to give that one a try, even though it's not something I would normally pick up. Finally, on June 24th, we're getting the last book that I have to talk about today, which is Misbehaving at the Crossroads by Honoré Fanon Jeffers. This one is the only book on this list, I believe, that is a nonfiction. This one is a series of essays about Black women across time and the ways that they have navigated the systemic social pressures that influence the ways that they can be in the world. It seems like it's going to be really insightful and probably deal with some really difficult topics. And again, it's outside of my comfort zone, but it's something that I feel like is a really important topic, and I really want to give this one a try. I also am really curious to see how Jeffers is going to use the motif of the crossroads, because based on the description that I read, it seems like that's going to be really significant throughout the book. So I'm really intrigued by this, and I've heard really good things about her writing in terms of her fiction. So I'm curious to see if this is going to lean more into like creative nonfiction or if it's going to be a little more straightforward nonfiction. But regardless, I think it sounds like it's going to be really interesting. So I'm excited to give it a shot. So those are all the books that I have on my list of anticipated releases for April to June. Let me know down in the comments below if there are any that I missed that you're looking forward to over the next few months. That's all I have for you today. I really hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, I hope you'll consider giving it a like, maybe even subscribing to see what comes next. Currently posting on Tuesdays and Saturdays, and hope to see you in the next video. Bye.